Peace to everybody. As you know, today is Veterans Day, and I thought I'd bring this to you, and it's called The History of Veterans Day and why we celebrate Veterans Day. And of course, we must all take this time to thank the men and women who served our country and who are still serving today. And as you can see here in the screenshot is some people with the flag. Veterans Day is a United States public holiday observed on November 11th of every year to honor all persons who have served in any branch of the United States Armed Forces. Veterans Day is a United States public holiday. Of course, it's on November 11th of every year to honor all persons who have served in any branch of the United States Armed Forces, whether it's the Navy, the Marines, the Army, and whatever else is there. And of course, it's all of the branches. On the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month in 1918, World War I ended. This day became known as Armistice Day. In 1921, an unknown World War I American soldier was buried in Arlington National Cemetery. Similarly, unknown soldiers had been buried in England at Westminster Abbey and at France at the Arc de Triomphe. These memorials took place on November 11th to commemorate the end of the war to end all wars. So this was on the 11th hour, the 11th day of the 11th month in 1918. That's when World War I ended. This day became known as Armistice Day. And of course, in 1921, an unknown World War I American soldier was buried at the Arlington National Cemetery. So nobody knew who he or she was, that was buried at the Arlington National Cemetery. And of course, every year the presidents have to go to the cemetery to put the wreath on the thing to show respect to the men and women who have fallen. Similarly, unknown soldiers have been buried in England at Westminster Abbey and at France at the Arc de Triomphe. All of these memorials took place on November 11th to commemorate the end of the war to end all wars. So that's what it did, was to end war of all wars. But unfortunately, the wars are still going on. In 1926, Congress resolved to officially call November 11th Armistice Day. Then in 1938, the day was named a national holiday. Soon afterward, war broke out in Europe and World War II began. So in 1926, Congress did resolve to officially call November 11th Armistice Day. But then, of course, in 1938, the day was named a national holiday. And soon afterward, war broke out in Europe and World War II began. Armistice Day became a Veterans Day. Soon after the end of World War II, a veteran of that war named Raymond Weeks organized National Veterans Day with a parade and festivities to honor all veterans. He chose to hold this on Armistice Day, thus began annual observances of a day to honor all veterans, not just the end of World War I. In 1954, Congress officially passed and President Dwight Eisenhower signed a bill proclaiming November 11th as Veterans Day due to his part in the creation of this national holiday. Raymond Weeks received the Presidential Citizens Medal from President Ronald Reagan in November of 1982. So soon after the end of World War II, a veteran of that war name was Raymond Weeks. So that's who he was. It organized National Veterans Day with the parade and festivities. So you got parades, you got festivities, and whatever else that came with it. To honor all veterans, he chose to hold this on Armistice Day, thus began annual observances of a day to honor all veterans, whether they're living or deceased. Not just the end of World War I. In 1954, Congress officially passed in President Dwight Eisenhower, so he signed a bill proclaiming November 11th as Veterans Day. So he went from Armistice Day to Veterans Day. Due to his part in the creation of this national holiday, Raymond Weeks received the Presidential Citizens Medal from President Ronald Reagan in November of 1982. So that's when Ronald Reagan gave him the medal. In 1968, Congress changed the national commemoration of Veterans Day to the fourth Monday in October. However, the significance of November 11th was such that the change date never really got established. In 1978, Congress returned the observance of Veterans Day to its traditional date. So really, it was supposed to be held on the fourth Monday in October, but that never happened. And of course, however, the significance of November 11th was such that the change date never really got established, so it never did. In 1978, Congress returned the observance of Veterans Day to its traditional date, so they changed it back to November 11th. So that's when you have Veterans Day, on November 11th of every year. There's no other date that's going to change it or anything. It just stays to November 11th every year. National ceremonies commemorating Veterans Day occur each year at the Memorial Amphitheater built around the Tomb of the Unknowns. At 11 a.m. on November 11th, a color guard representing all military services executes Present Arms at the tomb. Then a presidential wreath is laid upon the tomb. Finally, the burglar plays taps. So you got the national ceremonies. They're commemorating Veterans Day every year. Of course, there are amphitheater built around the Tomb of the Unknown. So when the unknowns are when nobody has claimed who their loved ones were or anything, so they just call them the unknown soldiers or unknown whoever they wanted to be. They are. And at 11 a.m. on November 11th, a color guard representing all military services execute Present Arms at the tomb. So they have to be there at the tomb. Then the presidential wreath is laid upon the tomb. Finally, the bugler plays taps. So yes, the bugler will play taps for all of the men and women who fell on this day and who served our country to try to keep us free. Each Veterans Day should be a time when Americans stop and remember the brave men and women who have risked their lives for the United States of America, as Dwight Eisenhower said. So each Veterans Day should be a time when Americans stop and remember the brave men and women who have risked their lives. They gave their life to keep us free. And this is what Dwight Eisenhower said: "It is well for us to pause to acknowledge our debt to those who paid so large a share of freedom's price. As we stand here in grateful remembrance of the veterans' contributions, we renew our conviction of individual responsibility to live in ways that support the eternal truths upon which our nation is founded, and from which flows all its strength and all its greatness. So yes, so it is well for us to pause to acknowledge our debt to those who paid so large a share of freedom's price. They so everybody must acknowledge that. As we stand here in grateful remembrance of the veterans' contributions, we renew our conviction of the individual responsibility to live in ways that support the eternal truth upon which our nation is founded, and from which flows all its strength and all its greatness. So that's what you do. Veterans Day is often confused with Memorial Day, observed annually on the last Monday in May. Memorial Day is the holiday set aside to pay tribute to persons who died while serving in the U.S. military. Veterans Day pays tribute to old people, living or deceased, who have served in the military. In this context, Memorial Day events are often more somber in nature than those held on Veterans Day. Yes, so Memorial Day and Veterans Day, yes, people do get them mixed up. Memorial Day is the last Monday in May, and it's also the unofficial start of summer. Memorial Day is when they pay tribute to all the men and women who are living or deceased. And this is why people get them all mixed up. And it's not easy trying to, it is easy to figure out what's what, but never get confused with Memorial Day or Veterans Day, because it's two different holidays. Memorial Day is the holiday set aside to pay tribute to persons who died while serving in the U.S. military. So this is what Memorial Day is. Veterans Day pays tribute to all the people, living or deceased, who have served in the military. So that's what Veterans Day is. On Memorial Day 1958, 2 unidentified soldiers were interred at Arlington National Cemetery, having died in World War II and the Korean War. In 1984, an unknown soldier who died in the Vietnam War was placed next to the others. However, this last soldier was later exhumed, and he was identified as Air Force First Lieutenant Michael Joseph Blassie. Therefore, his body was removed. These unknown soldiers are symbolic of all Americans who gave their lives in all wars. To honor them, an Army Honor Guard keeps day and night vigil, witnessing the changing of the guards at Arlington National Cemetery. Is a truly moving event. And yes, it is a truly moving event. Vietnam War was placed next to the others when you have an unknown soldier who died. And of course, later the soldier was exhumed, and he was identified as Air Force First Lieutenant Michael Joseph Blassie. Alright, so they had to exhume his body, but they could not exhume the others because they were unknown. Therefore, his body was removed. These unknown soldiers are symbolic of all Americans who gave their lives in all wars. To honor them, an Army Honor Guard keeps day and night vigil. So the vigil, they keep that day and night. Witnessing the changing of the guards at Arlington National Cemetery is a truly moving event. So you have guards that be changing, I don't know how many hours a day, but they have changing of the guards as well. So this is what they do. To identify soldiers were interred at Arlington National Cemetery, having died in World War II and the Korean War, of course. So let us all pay tribute to the men and women who served our country and is still serving today. Let's all take this moment to thank them very much for all they've done and to keep this country safe. Leave your comments below. I am out.